Hello, welcome.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about acceptance and creation, the balance.
Exciting.
And part of the reason we're talking about this is it seems as if Sean and I possibly inhabit two different places on this spectrum of acceptance and creation in terms of our external realities. So it's something that we've been thinking about a bit recently.
Yeah. I think so. On my side, I'm more of, and I wasn't always this way, but more recently, in the last few years, what I've found is that the universe seems to always be asking me to accept things as they are. Seems to be always sort of doing that same particular thing where it seems to be asking me, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? Can you accept this? Can you? And I'm not sure yet that I've figured out how this is balanced. We talk about non-doership, and we talk about sort of how it's the personality that makes us think that we're in control. But what's the balance between sort of accepting what is, but also making arrangements to perhaps change what is, right? And where does that become, I guess, misaligned, or where does that end up being sort of a problem instead of just a what would, like, if there's an issue in the world, in our world or any in the world, shouldn't we maybe take an effort to change it, or shouldn't we try to improve it? And how can we sort of figure out this modality of thought? I personally have issues around balancing this because I do tend to see things as perfect as they are, even when I'm uncomfortable. So it can feel for me a little challenging to feel inclined to do anything about it. It's more like I experience like, oh, this is what's happening. Okay, I have to sit with this and learn to accept this too then. And sometimes it doesn't so much occur to me to change anything. But I think that's sort of what we're talking about today, is trying to figure out what that balance means. And Tassel, I think, is sort of on the other side of it, where when she sees things in the world, she just really likes improving stuff. And so she sees stuff in the world, or in her world, her life, whatever, and sees a way to improve it. So says, I may as well do this thing to improve this. But that attitude also has gotten her into some stickier situations where she's maybe acting a little rashly or something like that as well. I don't want to speak for her. I shouldn't say that, but basically, I think what we've noticed is that I'm on sort of the extreme of acceptance, and she's more on the side of adjustment or change, to improve. Right? It's not like she's trying to just be like, the world has to be the way It's not like that. But yeah, so there's a balance here, and I guess that's the point of the discussion today, sort of to explore that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic because it really just gets at our base way of being in the world and in our daily life. It's sort of our orientation or philosophy around this really, in a way, dictates how we show up in our life, in almost every minute. And just a couple of points. It can seem very contradictory to hold both of these. I'm accepting, and I'm also open to what I can create here in my reality. It seems like a paradox. It seems like we live in a lot of paradoxes in the universe.
Yep.
And to me, it's so interesting to hear you say, sometimes it doesn't even occur to me to say, change something, because I am like so different than that. My ex-husband would call me a relentless self-improver. That's just, oh, this is the way it is. Oh, we can make it better. It's just my orientation. And I've noticed more recently how, as you said, sometimes the universe is asking for patience and for not immediate action. And I'll just give a quick example of this. Was it a week ago when I left Canada? I left Canada recently, and there were some mechanical issues on the first leg of my flight, and I ended up missing my connecting flight back to Nashville in Atlanta. And so I was somewhat stuck in Atlanta for a while. And the self-improver in me, the creator being in me, wanted to immediately take action and immediately just do something about getting back to Nashville as quickly as possible. And so I was inclined to rent a car from Atlanta to Nashville. It's about 4 hours, and do that drive. There was also the possibility of me being able to get on a standby flight a few hours later or much later in the evening. And it was just an interesting situation for me, because the doer in me, I have a very strong doer. The doer in me wanted to do immediately. I wanted to get out of the airport. I wanted to get away from the uncomfortable feelings of feeling somewhat trapped in airport world and powerless. I wanted to take my power back and empower myself and get in a car and just drive all the way home.
Airports have kind of an uncomfortable energy as well. I've noticed anyway, and I'm not super sensitive to that stuff. So
it's not,
I can imagine
energy.
It's a kind of stressful, busy, frustrated type of vibe there usually.
Yes.
I'll say North Carolina, though, that with the rocking chairs and stuff, that place is almost like, it's more like, Charlotte, it's more like a mall, but anyway.
Yeah. So to me, this was an example to me of, in a way, what we're talking about, of acceptance versus me taking action, basically. And where was the balance there?
Yep.
Accepting the reality that I was in versus taking action. And I'll just say, the older me probably might have just jumped and got the rental car. Would have just been so not wanting to be uncomfortable emotionally in any way. And even though it'd be a lot more driving, obviously, and an extra cost, I think it was going to be about $200 to rent a car. I think I might have done that. But the maybe more awakened me, maybe a little more able to sit in more discomfort, was able to make the decision to wait and see if I could get on a standby flight, which was kind of stressful. Like, would I get on it? But I'd end up saving money and I wouldn't have to drive 4 hours. So yeah, this is something that's hard for me. Accepting versus action. And I realize that the reason it's hard for me is really just because sometimes when I need to accept and not immediately take action, then I'm being invited to sit in uncomfortable feelings, which I I do try to avoid if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our nature as well, right? Like, if we have uncomfortable feelings, we want to avoid them almost always.
Yes.
I think I've been struggling with this since probably late 2019. around how to oh, hi Debbie. Nice to see you this morning. Around how to balance this type of orientation. And really the only thing, I've only come up with sort of one way to go about it, and this is the only way that I've figured out at all. And so I'll share that, and hopefully it helps people that are trying to balance this as well. But basically, first we have to separate the what reality is, and then also what we may feel inclined to do, right? So those aren't necessarily connected the way our mind would like to make them linear. What we feel called to do really has no bearing on what is. It's a bit of a tie that the rational mind makes to say, reality is this way, so therefore I'm going to do this. More likely is you sort of feel like you want to do this, and then the rational mind comes up with a sort of a reason to do it. But either way, what we want to try and do is separate those two things and evaluate, are we experiencing an inspiration to do something, or are we experiencing a resistance to something? So if we're resisting, then it's going to persist in our experience. So that's part of the importance of this. So we can't be too hasty, basically. Never be hasty with what you're doing. Like, evaluate your urge and consider, am I inspired to act because what I'm about to bring into the world will improve things, and I'm gonna bring something valuable in and all that? Or am I feeling or telling myself I'm inspired to act, but really at the root of it, I'm just resisting what is, and it's more like I want to change this so that I'm comfortable.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Can I just pause here
yeah.
and just relate it to the example that I gave, because what you said is really helpful. So in this example that I was talking about, should I wait in the airport, maybe make a standby flight, or should I rent a car and drive? I did not feel inspired really to rent the car. It wasn't like, oh, that's the perfect solution to that. That just feels so aligned. I did not feel that way.
Right.
I definitely more felt I have a lot of resistance to having to stay in the airport.
I think if you were inspired to rent the car and it wasn't about resistance, the way that might be experienced is, oh, I get to rent a car. I can go for a drive. This is going to be great. I can stop here and visit someone, or I can, like, it would feel very expansive, right?
Yeah. I was trying to avoid something.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I had. I just wanted to run away from being in the airport. So the way you've delineated it is really, really helpful. That I was experiencing resistance to staying in the airport. I was not experiencing an inspiration to rent the car.
Yeah.
So I believe I chose what was the aligned path, where I overcame my resistance to staying in the airport, and I did stay in the airport, and I did get on my standby flight.
Yeah. And I think, I think, I don't know if I just said this or not, but what you resist persists.
Yes, exactly.
If you were to have gone the other way and rented the car and sort of escaped the situation,
yes,
most likely that lesson is going to just pop up again. And it probably is anyway. I mean, patience is a huge lesson. Presuming that was the core of this lesson, I mean, I couldn't know. Only you could really know that. But whatever the core of that lesson is, if it's not noticed and used and learned and stuff, then it has to come back up. And
it's really interesting that you say that, because I could feel my higher self basically saying that to me. And that's what helped me stay in the airport and not escape. I could feel the messaging that this is something for you to experience, and do it now. Experience it now, and it may not need to come in later.
Yeah, like if you experience it at the airport in this situation, we've talked about a lot. The universe turns the volume up. So at this
Yes.
stage, it's a fairly it sucks, but it's fairly minor in the scheme of
Yes.
things, right?
Yes.
If
Yes.
if that lesson was avoided, the next lesson might be a little more intense as well.
Yes. Yes.
So it's something to keep in mind that and this is always what I start to refer to as like participating in the lesson. You start to become aware that every moment's a lesson of some kind. And it's your choice whether you participate or not. There's no, you don't have a teacher that's like got a ruler banging the desk. Do your work. That doesn't happen. You're the only one sort of who ever reviews and assesses yourself. Even when you die and do your review, it's you reviewing yourself. And considering, oh, wow, I messed up in these areas. Oh, I did pretty good here. So and your higher self is you in the future as well. So you're never having to worry about judgment as far as like failing lessons or whatever. So if you fail lessons, if an ordeal presents and you don't traverse it in the best way, you just let it go and go, well, I know that way was not the right way, but next time I may have a better idea. So you can kind of frame things in that way, and then review every challenge that approaches as like, oh, this is a lesson, and curiosity about that.
This is super interesting what you're saying. And what we're saying too is we can avoid the lesson, but then more than likely the lesson is going to come in again, and the volume may be turned up on the lesson.
It must come in again. It's like I just want to say this because it's important. I think it must come back in because the lesson exists because there's a distortion in the energy centers somewhere, and in order to ascend and to evolve, which is the goal, once we become awakened and realize that that's what we're sort of doing, we are just calling for these lessons constantly, and we're calling to purify the vessel so that we can ascend. And in order for us to walk sort of what is sort of like a staircase of light, we have to purify as much as we can, which just really means removing distortions. If the distortion exists, it will have to be removed eventually. So you'll go through the lesson. You have to. It's like a metaphysical requirement, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing around lessons that I've been noticing is in some aspects of my life where I thought I had, say, really mastered a certain lesson, I'm noticing situations coming in where the volume is turned down, where the situation is not as intense as what I've experienced before, but it is a similar situation. It's almost like to get like the last crumbs of that energy or the distortion cleared and integrated out of me.
Yeah.
I've been noticing that a lot too.
Yeah. The way to think about it is sort of like Catalyst presents as a challenge or a resistance or something. It presents, depending on how awakened and aware we are and conscious, determines usually how much of the catalyst we make use of for learning. You could think of the lesson as like being a huge book full of work to do, right? Most of the time, almost all of us, it's very, very rare for any being here to make full use of catalyst at any moment. We're too distracted. There's so much going on. All that stuff. So what tends to happen is you get given like a giant book of lesson, and you'll work through a bit of it, right? So next time that lesson's going to come back most likely again because you didn't finish. You did a bunch of it, but you didn't finish. And this is why patience, for example, the lesson is like massive, right? So we get presented with so many opportunities to learn that lesson. Once we start to make use of that catalyst and learn the lesson more effectively, we get better and better at it. And then sort of the intensity usually starts to go down on these experiences. whether you have to wait for stuff or not, the patience slash impatience distortion is minimized, right? It's getting lessened. So the intensity of the impatience is going to be lower regardless of what's happening. So it doesn't mean that you won't wait for stuff. It just means that it won't bother you as much. So as we work on the lesson and stuff, it starts to dwindle away. But, and what we're talking about today, though, is how do I know, like, how can I tell? How do I know if I'm meant to just sit with it and just be like, oh, I hate this, but, when am I supposed to act, right? When am I supposed to do stuff to change it? So I've had a lot of questions like, am I being like arrogant to presume to change the universe, right? These are the questions you have to ask yourself, I think, to try and find a balanced approach, because a lot of time we are acting out of arrogance when we don't realize it. We're saying, I know how the world should be, let me put it into order. And do we know how it should be? I would venture to say that we have absolutely no idea how anything should be, and that things are directly and specifically as they should be already. And so how do we balance that perspective with the perspective of, okay, so I shouldn't do anything then? Like, so it gets a little bit challenging.
Could we share the story of what you and I went through last Thursday?
Sure.
Maybe this can we can glean.
Sure. Before you get into this, I'd like to say that I feel after we went through it all, I feel like I handled it well. I may have learned to speak a little bit sooner or something. But I think for this particular moment, I was meant to just sit and see what happened, sort of thing. But let's talk about that example.
Yeah, just because I think it is an interesting example of acceptance versus action / creation. Should I lay out the story, or do you want to?
Sure. I'll just, we've talked about it, I think last stream or something. So we probably don't have to go into it too much. Basically, we were creating a course, and we had a bunch of work to do. And I thought that we were going to get up and work in the morning. Tassel ended up having, the kids had a snow day. There was snow in Nashville, a whole bunch of it. It's not normal. So instead of coming on to work in the morning, she said, well, I'm going to take my kids sledding and stuff and do that with them. And I was like, the course we were working on was really important to me. And I thought that we had a lot of work to do on it still. And I was worried. That we wouldn't be able to get it finished, that type of thing. And so it was really uncomfortable for me to just be like, the plan we made just fell apart, basically. I still have this big desire to do the work, but she's like doing something else. And who am I to say anything about any of that, right? Like, it's none of my business, basically, is how I really see it. It's none of my business what people are doing. She knows what I want to do. We agreed on it already, and she did something else. So the decision's been made. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to talk about. So on my side, I was like, well, this is uncomfortable. I will sit in it. And that's what I did. So I didn't say anything really. And then later she came on and we worked on it, and it turned out fine. It was all fine. But the question came up later, would it have been better for me to speak up? Was I pulling opportunity for her to make decisions that maybe were better for both of us or all people involved by like maybe spending less time sledding or whatever? I don't really think that in this particular situation that anything was done wrong. I think the situation was literally so we could have these types of discussions around it, and also so that I could understand my intuition better for me on my side, because intuitively I understood sort of very accurately what she was kind of going through in her experience. So I wasn't super, I think that those were the lessons there, But, you know, should I have said anything, or if this were to happen again, should I speak up sooner, and that type of thing, is some of the stuff we were talking about. And if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, or that I missed explaining, feel free.
Yeah, I just think, and then there's a second part of the story that I'll say in a minute, which is about the same thing. But your part of the story, I just think is really interesting because it just gets exactly at this, okay, I'm accepting, or am I maybe going to speak my truth and see if something can shift here? So it's just a really interesting example of that. And then the second example of that on the same day is when I came home. It was a very dramatic day. I was sledding with the kids, and then I drove them to my former husband's house, basically in a blizzard. And it was not a good decision that I made. And I sort of barely made it back without massive injury to the car. And I did actually get a flat tire through the whole snow journey. But then when I came back, you were not feeling well, and you had texted me that you didn't think you could do the course at all that night, that we'd postpone it. And this was hard for my human to take in. And then we talked on the phone, and, you know, I think I said, okay, so I guess I'll contact everybody and we'll postpone it. And then we sort of continued to talk, and we talked about maybe both of us somewhat being under psychic attack because we really consider this Namaste method, that's what we were teaching, to be quite revolutionary and really, really helpful. Our sort of entities trying to prevent us from getting this out into the world. So we talked about maybe both of us possibly having had that experience.
Can I just I just want to quickly interject, just if anyone wants to learn about what psychic attack, what we're talking about with that, it's very common when people are doing this type of work to experience it. And you can learn more about it in the Law of One for free at llresearch.org.
Yeah, awesome.
Continue.
So we were talking about possibly, we thought we might have been under psychic attack, and then the conversation turned to, oh, I don't know even if we would have enough time to do the course because we hadn't yet finished the preparation for it. And then I voiced, well, if it's just about that, for me, I think we can do it. We have 3 hours, and I do think it's better just to deliver at the time we're going to say that we're going to, rather than postpone it. And then you seemed to, I don't know if you agreed with that, or you seemed to be like, okay, let's do it. So to me, this is an example of how I tend to, well, I would just say I felt inspiration, I would say. So you made this great delineation of if it's acceptance versus creation/action. Are we acting from inspiration or resistance? And I would say I felt just so motivated to want to deliver our course. It felt so important and aligned to do so. So I ended up expressing that, and then it, you know, we did end up making it happen. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I want to say that in these examples, I can see how both orientations are perfect. And maybe I'll try to point that out a little bit, and how that shows up. So on my side, I respected Tassel's decision to do what she wanted to do. and, didn't say anything. I felt uncomfortable, and I feel that that it's courageous to bring things forward when you're uncomfortable and bring them up, but it's also courageous sometimes to realize that this is my thing and I can deal with it and it's going to be okay, and not bring things up and not turn it into a thing, especially if you're unbalanced, which I was for a little bit about it. So, so I think that the way that I handled it on my side was perfect for me. And then on the other side of that, once I said that I wasn't feeling very good, I don't know if I could do this, Tassel could have just said, oh, well, I guess we're not doing it then, right? If she was more oriented to my side, to my way of seeing things, she would have just said, oh, well, I guess we'll reschedule, and it would have been done. But because she's more interested in, she had an inspiration to continue doing it and voice that, I hear the universe saying, are you sure you want to not do this work, Sean? That's what I hear. And I, in a couple of moments, I questioned myself and I was like, you know what? I don't feel really that I can do it, but the universe is asking me again to do it, and I'll do it. Accept what is and accept what feels aligned. And it felt aligned to try and do it. So had she not said anything, that probably wouldn't have happened. And so you can see just by this little interaction that both orientations are perfect for the individual. And if she had tried to be more like me, for example, and not said anything, then we wouldn't have done the course, which turned out amazing and ended up being something that we're getting ready to sell and all that stuff too. So basically what I'm trying to say is what I'm starting to see through this interaction with us is that the lesson, I think here, one of the major lessons is to accept yourself as you are, to understand that you're perfect. So I'm not inclined to change people. I'm not inclined to convince them of stuff. It feels gross to me to do that. Not that like I said, I have no judgment of other people that feel inclined to try to convince people of stuff or whatever. There's no judgment, but for me, I don't feel right doing that. Like, I just will say what I think and then let them do as they do. And so if people are not doing things that I think they should do, I'm probably not going to tell them, because it's none of my business what they're doing. That's how I see it. Even me and Tassel being as close as we are, it's none of my business what she does, unless she makes it my business and asks for my opinion, asks for my whatever. That is how I'm oriented. It must be something from maybe where I come from, or I don't know, but I'm not oriented to just be like, oh, I know you feel this way, but maybe you should consider doing it this way or that way. I don't know how to do that. So what I'm trying to illustrate, though, is that whatever way is fine. There's no wrong way to approach this. I think the lesson here is to accept your inner pulls. My pulls were not to speak about it. My pulls were to review the catalyst, to watch what was coming in, to observe myself, and to sit with it on my own. And, I've questioned myself over this particular example a whole bunch to try and be like, did I do it right? And I arrived at, I think I was fine. I think I did it fine. There are some considerations that I noticed around, like, I could just say how I feel, but to what end? What is my aim in doing that? And in those moments at the time, my aim would have been to adjust what Tassel was doing. Like, if I'm honest, I wouldn't just be telling her to express myself. I'd be telling her so that she would try and change what she's doing, to make me more comfortable. and that doesn't make me comfortable. So I'm just assessing myself honestly and sort of saying, she knew what was going on and what she wanted to do, and she made her decisions, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with it, even though I'm uncomfortable. It's okay. And then on the other side of that, if she didn't speak up when she did, we wouldn't have done the work, right? So like, there's a balance that has to be had around, and I think it's, again, inspiration versus resistance. I didn't feel inspired to talk about these things. I felt that talking about these things was just me acting out my resistance. So yeah.
It's so interesting. There's so many nuances here. And it's really interesting that you said maybe one of the main reasons you didn't speak about how you were feeling on that day was because you felt you would be doing that to try to adjust my behavior, which did not feel aligned for you. And for me, I think where I come from, the desire to just be very transparent all the time is so strong. And I hold that same desire with others, that they will be completely transparent with me too. I think that's where I come from. So to me personally, I really like to speak my truth, and I feel that I'm able to let go of the outcome of it. Even when we were talking that night about the course, if me speaking my truth and we didn't end up doing the course, I would have been okay with that. What felt most important was just to be in the truth with each other. It to me feels very difficult to, in something like that, not speak the truth. The speaking of the truth feels like what's most important to me, not actually what happens. And then for you, if something like this happened again, my preference, and this is just my truth, and I'm not attached to the outcome, but my preference would be for you just to speak freely about what was going on for you, just so I would know. Because you did tell me later what was going on, and I said, oh, it's very helpful, because I didn't even know that these sorts of things you really cared about or bothered you. And so knowing your truth ended up being very helpful for me. So, I mean, as you said, each one of us has to run this through our own guidance and what feels right to us. But for me personally, I love the orientation of just complete transparency between people, and not trying to force anything, but just getting it all out on the table. And then we say this a lot, what seems to happen is when all the truth is on the table, the highest and best outcome just bubbles up magically. And you don't have to force anything. It just usually becomes very clear to all parties involved what is the highest and best outcome. So to me, it's holding faith of the transformative power of truth. We all lay our truth out, and then look how the highest and best outcome just appears almost magically.
Yep. So I guess what I'll say about that is my orientation is aligned transparency. So transparency earlier on in the day didn't feel aligned. It didn't. The basic way to express that is to say that I didn't know my own truth in the moment. I was confused. I was upset. So I don't feel that transparency there is true transparency. Transparency is, to me, authentic, aligned truth. The truth was that I'm experiencing a catalyst that I need to look at and deal with. The truth was it had nothing to do with Tassel, and I knew that. Later, when that issue was gone, we were past it, then I was open and transparent about it, so that so that these types of realizations could bubble up, like you said. Once the truth is brought up and people are transparent, then yes, then the it all bubbles up with the highest and best, and everyone can become aware. And you became aware that I experienced this, became aware that I can have trouble around this type of thing as well. So I think that there's a balance just to be had around. I think particularly the timing around our expression, and just I basically what I'm trying to say is that earlier in the day I was not balanced around what was happening. It was not, in my estimation, the right time for me to try and change anything, or I needed to first grasp a little bit what I'm experiencing. And so I think my only point that I'm trying to make is to trust yourself as far as when you feel comfortable sharing and when you don't, and notice as well that even that, right, is another resistance that you can traverse and learn to pass. So just, is your resistance because you're scared to speak your truth? Because in no way was I ever hesitant for any reason other than it just felt like I'm supposed to look at this. I have no problem expressing, it makes me feel like this when this happens, it makes me feel this way, all that stuff. I've traversed that aspect, right? So I don't feel scared to share my truth, but now I'm at a place where I'm just assessing, is my feelings now, like, are my feelings now true? Like, is this true, what I'm feeling? And do I need to act right now because I have these feelings? And I would endeavor to say that generally, no. Generally, when we're uncomfortable, no, we're experiencing falsity. So, what I'm trying to recommend, I think, is a little bit of a review as time permits. Sometimes we have to act right away, but a lot of times we act when we're in resistance or in challenge, and we act kind of instinctually, or we don't consider really what lessons might be here, what's being offered, like. And so all I'm trying to suggest is, like, we still traversed all of that transparency, and we still got to the place of a better clarity between both of us. The delay and my calling or feeling not to speak about it, I've assessed a lot, and it feels like it was aligned for me. And I can understand the desire to hear about the experiences of the other as quickly as possible as well. But I'm just sort of saying that my what I feel is the best approach for me is to assess where this is coming from, assess, like I said, if I were speaking earlier in the day, I would have been speaking really to try and change the situation. I would have been like, here's how I feel. Hopefully she changes it. Hopefully this gets her attention a bit and she does something that makes me more comfortable. It's a selfish expression. In that moment, it would have been. If I'm honest with myself, I would have been being selfish when I spoke that way. That would have been, my goal would have been for things to change, which is why I didn't speak, because I don't like to impose my expectations of things onto people. And so in that arena, I wasn't, even if I was transparent about it, it would not have been my honest truth. My truth was that I wanted you to do as you wished. And
yeah, I didn't quite understand when you were explaining it that you felt somewhat out of balance. You were not quite centered, balanced in your truth. So what you're saying is really interesting about speaking the truth when we found balance. I guess speaking the truth when it really is our core truth without the distortion or the possible agenda that the human might have at times.
If I spoke my truth earlier on in the day, I probably would have used judgment, or some of my expression energetically may have come across critical of you. At those moments, I felt like you were disregarding me, that disregarding our business, disregarding what we were doing in order to go sledding. Right. So at the time, I'm like, what is this? Like, we're often talking about this, and we've had conversations around how some of my behaviors have triggered this type of, like, what's he doing type questions. Right. So if I spoke in that moment, a lot of that energy probably would have come out. So basically I was trying to get into a place of seeing that you didn't do anything wrong, and that, and we've talked about this in the Namaste method, but coming out of the adversarial perception that she's done this or I've done this, and you know, she doesn't get it, and why would she do this? She's going sledding. But then at the same time, I had a lot of also feelings around, like, well, I probably would have done the same thing if my kids wanted to go tobogganing on a snow day, and then, you know, I probably would have done the exact same thing. I knew that too, so I was very conflicted as well. So I didn't really know what the truth was, and a lot of times, I think we think because we're uncomfortable that indicates to us that this moment is not correct, and let's put it into order. And then we speak, and that's when we end up being very judgmental or critical, and kind of hurting people, right? So whether we mean to or not, we can use peaceful language but still criticize. So
I think it's great that you've added all these details about when we share the truth. Ideally, we share it when we're balanced and we're not attached to any particular outcome. We're just sharing what is our personal truth about something, and whatever the highest and best, we accept whatever that is.
Yeah, I think if we speak earlier than that, we're asking the other person to take some of our burden, right, and help us heal it. That's sort of, I think, what we're doing. Like, because we're having pains and stuff, and then we're kind of inviting the other person to come into this issue with us. And I guess maybe it's a compassion that I hold, that I'm like, I see no reason to involve the other people in my hurt right now, unless I need it. If I feel I need some support, then of course. But so like we always say, you know, go through your own judgment, your own discernment, your own guidance. Only you can know. And that's why even when Tassel and I have sort of different orientations to this whole thing, not different, we're in agreement, but we have different instinctual, I guess, or more natural orientations to how we navigate these things. I try to really listen and hear what she's saying as far as her wanting to know what's going on and all that stuff. And I guess what I'm trying to say is pay very close attention to that, like, because I could have been resisting because I was afraid to speak my truth. I felt she wouldn't accept me, or I felt like I couldn't, or, you know, but it wasn't really about that for me. It was more about, I don't think that in the moment I even had any idea what my truth was. I think that I was confused and sitting in a bunch of fear and anxiety. And when I'm in that's the truth of my feeling in that moment, but it's not my core truth, or the truth that I really want to embody.
Yeah, that's a really great delineation. The truth of the moment when we are possibly triggered, we're wounded, we're suffering, and the core truth that we come back to after we've moved some of that through us. That's a really great distinction. And in our Namaste method, I think we would probably say that those momentary truths, we want to be really, really careful with, because that's where a lot of injury to the relationship can happen.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You can think about like all of us back to think whenever whenever we've had an emotional outburst and hurt someone's feelings, for example, or
Yes.
said something that almost right after or maybe years later, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That's always because we've stepped outside of our real truth or our
Yes.
core truth. We've stepped
Yes.
outside of it and then said it as if it was our truth,
Yeah.
and we've realized that's not how we feel. It's not real. That's not. I was
Yes.
upset and I was confused and I said this stuff, and then we come back
Yes.
to our truth, and then we realize the contrast between how we truly feel and what we said, and that feels really bad. So
Yeah.
and there's a balance, and everyone has to try and figure it out on their own. So hopefully some of the
Yes.
examples we've offered and some of the things we went through help. And it's not just about speaking truth. This is about whether we start to act to change our situation or we sit with it and just observe it. And I think,
Yes.
I think what I'm trying to say, I guess, is pay attention to where the motivation to act is coming from.
Yeah. And I
And
wanted to say again, you so beautifully, wisely delineated it. Is it coming from an inspiration or a resistance? Am I trying to escape something, or am I really feeling guided to do something? Where's the difference? And something that I think is really interesting about this as well is our astrological signs, including our North Node and South Node, and how they are influencing the personality and influencing our orientation towards acceptance versus creation action. So just as an example, my Aries North Node, I'm Aries North Node. And as I understand it, I'm still figuring it out, but the Aries North Node is super action oriented, very action oriented, very much about execution, very much about leadership, very much about I'm here and things are happening. So that may possibly completely explain why I am the way I am, because I think I might be supposed to be very action oriented in this lifetime.
Yeah, I think that's basically my kind of ultimate point, is that a lot of times we might think we're learning lessons too, when really what we're doing is judging ourselves and trying to change the way we naturally feel. Like, so our natural inclination to do or not do is perfect. And I really think part of what we're trying to realize is trusting how we feel, right? So if I feel to act, then act. Easy. Now, when you do that, I'm suggesting consider where the feeling of action is coming from, like have a look at it. You'll figure it out. The universe will show you whether you were acting out of resistance or acting out of inspiration. If you're acting out of resistance, you're going to have a bit of a sludgy kind of progression through it. It's going to feel a little obstacles will pop up. You probably won't really enjoy it. You'll be a bit agitated probably as you move, because you're pushing I sort of see life as like a stream of divinity, and then we tend to like try to pull out of it, and that just feels like weird. It feels like we're fighting stuff. Things don't flow. We'll try to get a rental car, and then they won't have any except the super expensive ones, and then things like that, and you could still do it, but it's like, this is not going great. So the universe will tell you, you're resisting me, right? And then when we're in alignment and we're inspired, it's going to feel just grand. It's going to feel great. It's going to feel exciting, curious, something like that.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to that example that I gave, about being in the airport and trying to make a decision about flying standby or renting a car, I was reading the feedback from the universe. I looked at the car rental prices and they were super expensive. It was about
Interesting.
$200. It was about $200 to rent a car. And so I just read that and I thought, the universe is telling me, do not rent a car. Do not rent a car. And then I did end up getting on the first standby flight.
Yeah.
So as you said, when we're really paying attention and letting go of possibly what the human might want to do, it's just very clear what to do. It's always, the signs are there. Go this way. It's going to be hard if you go that way. And another sign that came in is I called my former husband to talk it out, and I talked it out with you too. And my former husband said, "Oh, you're going to be driving through Atlanta during rush hour. The roads are really bad. There was snow there." So I was like, "Oh, there's some more information." I mean, it's like obvious.
Yeah, you could still get a car and drive through there if you want to, right? Like, the choice is yours. And you know, something I always fall back on whenever I'm like trying to make any decision is there are no mistakes.
Yes.
There's no such thing as mistakes or accidents or coincidences. These things do not exist. These are just concepts that humans kind of have come up with to explain when they don't like something that just happened, or when something happened very mysteriously. Oh, it must be just coincidence, random coincidence, right? It's nothing's random. Well, I mean, there is some randomness to some generation of stimuli, but you know, it's all random within parameters, I would say. So it's not totally random. And, you know, if there are no mistakes, it means, like, just intrinsically, that you cannot make the wrong decision either, right? Whichever decision you go with, you know, and this is how the higher self can manage the human, because the human is only ever responding to energized conditioning. So if you're offered a donut versus a pile of lettuce, let's say, the higher self can see which of these choices and the energized polarity of the options, right? The higher self is already aware, very aware of which one you're going to go and pick. Sometimes you may surprise them, but generally speaking, you're gonna pick the one that's more energized. Hassel would probably pick the pile of lettuce because she's a rabbit. Now I would pick the donut.
The pile of lettuce. That was just a hilarious phrase. And I think that's how you would describe my meal plan.
Yeah, pile of grass or lettuce.
Pile of lettuce.
It's not. She does it. She puts lots of dressing on it. I'm sure it's delicious. It's not for me, but I would probably pick the donut. I don't really like donuts that much, but I like it a lot more than a pile of leaves. So my point is just to illustrate that the higher self knows more or less what you're probably going to pick, and has arranged usually the decision, especially if it's a bigger decision. Sometimes it arranges them so that you really have to assess yourself. And like the purpose of it is to really look at your own desires and how you feel. And so the higher self has arranged a bit of a decision where you have almost a very strong dynamic tension between what seem to be both ways you think are decent ways to go, and you just can't decide. And so a lot of that is meant to inspire a deeper introspection. Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. But whatever you choose, the higher self basically knows what you're going to pick anyway. And you know, you can sort of just relax yourself a bit. You know, that, and depending on how big the choice is, that can be hard. But if we can remember that how whatever we pick is perfect, then we can sort of just walk with a smile on our face and just do whatever we want, whatever, and then just let it go. Like, you know, but you have to believe that there are no mistakes. And so I just constantly remind myself, that's I guess one of the biggest practices I would suggest, constantly remind yourself when you have that voice going, oh, you shouldn't have done that. No, there are no mistakes. Just maybe next time I'll do it a little different, but I should have done that. Otherwise I would not have done that. And there you go. Move on.
I also take a lot of comfort in the truth that we're all infinite, eternal beings. So whenever is the right time for us to expand in a certain way, it will happen. It doesn't have to be a rush. We don't have to evolve at light speed. We can sort of let go of the pressure.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to learn all these lessons. I've got to expand so much. We're going to be constantly evolving, expanding through the infinite space of time.
Yeah. And
there really is no rush.
And this is what frustrates me the most about our education system. The education system is, in my opinion, the main pressure cooker of this continual self-improvement and pressure that we put on ourselves to do better, be better, whatever. Immediately we're starting to be tested and judged about everything that we do in the school. And it starts out when we're so young. Like it's very, I think, kind of a sort of torture. So
I think it's trauma.
Yeah, it's trauma based. Exactly. And I guess I wanted to just say, a lot of times we feel like we have to decide immediately. Most of the time we don't. Most of the, like, for example, at the airport, do you have to get a car this second, or can you sit and just think about it and consider and look at the options? There's nothing wrong. Window shop a bit. Are there options that I'm not considering? Like, you don't have to just go, oh, I better go now. Otherwise, like, the universe, sometimes you do have to act quickly, right? Of course. But generally speaking, when you have to act quickly, you will. And when you don't have to act quickly, you'll have time to consider. And so, like, if it's an emergency, you're going to have to act quickly, and you will, right? So it's a whole different ball game.
That's a big socialization in our culture around time, that it's more ideal to act quickly.
The quicker, the better.
Waste time.
Yeah.
Mulling over a decision. But I think, especially if you're learning some patience in that lesson and some ability to sit in the not knowing, in the I don't know what I'm going to do, just to be able to sit in that. Those are two really beautiful expansions to make: patience and sitting and not knowing.
And some people are also, just to mention this, because I'm sure that there's someone, I could feel them right now, there's someone listening that is working on analysis paralysis. And, sometimes you can get yourself stuck just constantly evaluating all the stuff.
Yes. There's all these polarities. Yeah.
There's balancing, right? If you find that you're like, oh, I have so many options. Sean says I don't have to rush, so I'll just sit here and never decide. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying that you're feeling it that way, whoever you are, but, there's a balance to be had in all of these orientations. And basically, if you're under analysis paralysis, it's just fear, right? It's you're scared of something. And so really, I think the best way to approach those is to just flip a coin, let the universe decide, right? That's honestly, that would be honestly my recommendation. If you cannot decide between option A and option B, let the universe decide, heads or tails, boom. The universe will decide it. Like, if you think about anything that exists, right? It's all divinity, all the creator. The creator, you flip the coin will land as is meant to, if you're going to follow that regardless. So that couldn't be a mistake. If we go back to what I was saying earlier about there are no mistakes, the coin will tell you the way. It will always tell you the way if you use a coin. Yep. And that's why I really like one of that Batman character, Two-Face or Scarface or whatever his name is, because he flips the coin when he's deciding if he's going to kill people and stuff like that. We're not really talking about that type of decision so much, but when you're making decisions, if you can't decide, flip a coin. Or if you like tarot, if the card's reversed, that's a no. You know, or if the card's up, that's a yes. But these crutches, the universe will start to pull you from them. You'll notice that, like, when you flip the coin and then it goes really poorly. And that's the universe saying you were meant to really consider this and pick yourself.
Yes. So just to summarize, to wrap up, you made such a great point in the beginning that if we're trying to decide between accepting a current reality or taking some action to shift a current reality, we can go back to, am I really feeling inspired to do something, or am I more feeling resistance about trying to avoid something and just running that through us? And that can really help us make that decision.
Yeah. And take your time if you can, and just assess yourself.
If you're in analysis paralysis.
Yeah, or don't, you know, take time, but don't. You know, everything's a balance and a paradox.
A paradox. Yeah.
Yeah. So take your time or don't. You know, like it's always like this. Patience is always balanced with impatience. In order for us to be patient about something, there has to be an opportunity to be impatient about it too. And so the entity just views it and sees whatever polarity it wants and then has to balance. So, you know, we're all infinitely unique and we all experience all of this differently. So just trust yourself, try to, you know, let go of fear and follow what you feel called, what gives you the tingles, what gets what gets the goosebumps going and stuff.
Feels aligned.
Try to follow that stuff. As I say that, I'm getting goosebumps. So.
Awesome. All right. I think that is a wrap.
I think so.
Okay.
We've been going over an hour, like at most episodes now. I hope that's okay. Nobody's complained about the length. So, but yeah, it's I'm sure we'll speak precisely as long as we are meant to, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. If you like the video, click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Consider checking out our Patreon. We just did the Namaste method and we've released the video recording. So if you get the $15 tier, you'll be able to watch that recording. And honestly, I think it's a revolutionary model. So tooting our own horn a little bit, but I really do think it'll help a lot. So sending you all the blessings.
So much love to everyone.